friends, and thanks for joining me. And it's Tuesday, so that means we're going to talk about our finances. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on this channel is our mortgages. And one of the things I talk about a lot is paying extra toward our mortgages. I've done a lot of different, videos on, how to pay off your mortgage faster, different strategies on doing so, how big of an impact this really makes, just different things like that. And so obviously one of the main questions that can come up is, when do you not pay extra toward your mortgage? So a lot of people will say, well, I want to pay extra toward my mortgage, but, and there are a lot of good reasons for these. And some we can actually calculate out and find out if this is actually something that, makes sense, or we can, figure out if maybe it's actually a good idea to put the money toward the mortgage instead. And then others are kind of opinions. So let's go through them and see, the different, reasons why, and whether or not, we can calculate them out to find out if that's a good choice or not. So the first one I want to talk about is if somebody says they have other debts. Hopefully there isn't too much of a glare. I'm sorry. If somebody says that they have other debts. So if somebody has other debts, this is typically a pretty good reason not to put extra money toward their mortgage. And the reason is, a lot of times, other debts, if somebody has like a credit card or a car loan or anything else, a student loan, these typically have higher interest rates and will cost more money over time than if they were to put this money toward their mortgage. So these other debts tend to be bad debts, as we just talked about recently, and because they are bad debts, they're something that depreciates and they have higher interest rates, and so those definitely are more pressing. And so I would definitely recommend that if anybody has other debts, that they put money toward those other debts before they devote extra money to their mortgage. So this one is a definite yes. And this is a good reason to skip putting extra money toward that mortgage. The second one would be if somebody were to say they had other goals. Say they wanted to save for a new car or something else like that. Obviously, this is pure opinion. If somebody needs a new car or they feel they need a new car, then hey, that's their choice, So obviously this is another good reason. If they feel that they need this, then they should be putting that money towards something else. So another good reason to, not pay extra toward the mortgage if that's something that they choose to do. The next one is can't afford. Somebody will say, well, I would love to put extra money toward my mortgage, but I just can't afford it. Well, this can kind of go both ways. This is somewhat opinion, because if someone is, doing different things in their budget, somebody else might look at that and say, oh, well, you could, cut back on this or that to make extra money for that, and other times, they maybe really can't. Maybe their budget is just so tight that they couldn't. So honestly, again, either boat that this person is in, even if there are other areas that they could cut, but they're choosing not to, and then just, paying their regular mortgage payment, there's honestly nothing wrong with that. If they want to just keep making their regular mortgage payment, that's up to them. Of course, it's going to take a little bit longer and they're going to end up paying, extra interest, but that's okay. Everybody has their priorities in life and there's no right or wrong to this. So not something I can calculate out. So we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so the next one we actually kind of covered a little bit already, but we'll do a quick recap. But my interest rate is so low that it doesn't make sense to put extra money toward the mortgage. In my video recently about how much does debt actually cost, we actually calculated this out. So we'll just talk about this really quickly. So 3.8% over a 30-year loan actually ends up to be 67.7% interest that they actually end up paying over time. So do keep that in mind. Even if it seems like you have a really low interest rate, it's very likely that you're going to be paying a lot more money over the course of the entire loan. So personally, I would say even if you have an interest rate that's very low, like again, our mortgage has a very low interest rate, 2.875, and yet we're still putting extra mortgage or money toward it when we can. Which has been really difficult lately. So this is another reason where, this is an opinion. If somebody wants to put the extra money toward their mortgage, they certainly can, but don't be fooled into thinking that 3.8 means you're only paying 3.8%. It's very likely that you're paying a lot more than that. So the next one would be, I only have X amount of years left anyway. So I actually calculated this one out. This is something that we can go ahead and calculate. And so I just threw some really stock numbers in there, a $200,000 loan and a 30-year mortgage, which is the standard, the industry standard. If this person had 8 years left, 4.5%, and they were to add just $200 a month, they would end up saving $3,116, and they would pay off their mortgage 1 year and 6 months sooner. So just $200 extra a month saves $3,116. So 30-year mortgage and only 8 years left means this person's already 22 years into it. Yeah, so this is definitely one of the ones where even if you're further along in the mortgage and you think, oh, I only have a certain amount of years anyway, it does seem to make sense. Let's go ahead and do the next scenario though quickly. So let's say it was the same exact scenario, 30-year mortgage, $200,000 loan. Say this person only had 5 years left, so they had already been in this mortgage for 25 years. If they were to add that same $200 a month, they would end up saving $1,183 and cut off 10 months of the mortgage. So they would pay it off 10 months sooner. Again, there's a huge savings there. If there was something I could do to save $1,000, I absolutely would. So, this is definitely something to consider. Even if you're far along in your mortgage and you're like, only have a few years left, I might as well just keep making my regular payments until I get to the end, it might be worth paying some extra. And really quickly, as sort of a side shoot on this, the amortization schedule puts that we make our payments on the 1st. If there was ever a time when the 1st was a Saturday and so it doesn't apply until the following Monday, or say we paid it on a Saturday but then Monday was a holiday and so it didn't get applied until Tuesday, these sorts of things. Late payments make it to where we're actually still we're still having the interest accumulate on that loan. And so at the end of your mortgage, when there's the maturity date, if there's any extra money that was tacked on because of late payments, we would end up owing that money all at once. So if your regular mortgage payment was $600, but because there were some late payments made in the beginning, you could end up owing, a couple $1,000s or more. So making some extra payments earlier on when we can, or even if we're still only a few years out, really does make sense, because if you wait until that maturity date, you might end up with a nasty surprise, owing more than just your last mortgage payment and getting, out of it, in case those payments weren't always made right on the 1st. So do keep that one in mind. The next one is going to be that we are going to move in a couple of years anyway. So this is another one that I could calculate out. I did some not really stock numbers. Say someone were to have a 30-year mortgage. So they have a 30-year mortgage. They have 27 years left, so they've really only lived here 3 years. If they were to add $500 a month either to their mortgage or if they were to put that in a savings account, I calculated out the numbers differently. So if you were to take that $500 a month and put it into a savings account, $500 a month times 24 months for those 2 years, ends up to be $12,000. If they were to put this money into their mortgage instead, if they were to take that $500 and add it to their mortgage, they would have built up $20,776. So their $12,000 turns into $20,000, almost 21. So adding it to the mortgage actually made this money grow a whole lot faster. And that's just after 2 years. Let's say somebody were in their house, again, same exact scenario, 30-year mortgage, they've lived there 3 years, and instead of moving in 2 years, they decided to move in 5 years. They had a 5-year plan to buy a bigger house or something like that. If they were to take that same $500 a month and put it just in a regular savings account, that would have ended up being $30,000. But if they put that extra $500 a month into their mortgage instead, that money would have been $55,000 and $55,052 in extra equity that they would have built up. So their $30,000 they actually paid would have magically turned into $55,000. Now, I don't know what kind of, savings account they have or what kind of interest they can get on it, but I'm very confident that there's no way that they could, make enough interest in a savings account that it would actually accumulate to that same amount. So the money grows faster actually putting it into your mortgage than it does when you're just putting it into a regular savings account. Now, there's obviously some other things you want to consider. If a person is intending to move, there's obviously living expenses or moving expenses that they're going to have to accommodate for. There's actually moving, there's like the earnest money that you have to put down. There's, sometimes fees to set up escrow accounts, and sometimes they want like a year's worth of, taxes in advance. And so there's definitely some wisdom in, having some money in an actual savings account rather than putting it all toward the mortgage. I'm just saying, if a person were intending to move and they were taking money and putting it just in a savings account, hoping to build up that savings account and then take that savings account and adding it to what they can actually buy a house for or with later, the money does grow faster if the balance of that money, the extra, the stuff that they don't need as a liquid asset, if they can pour that into their mortgage instead, the money will definitely grow faster. So this is one of the ones where, if someone was planning to move anyway, it still does make sense to put some extra money into the mortgage where they're at now. So there you go, friends. Lots and lots of numbers as always. Hopefully this information was helpful to you. You know, when should you put extra toward your mortgage, and when is it better to just go ahead and skip it and put it somewhere else? So I'll see you next time. I'm Frugal Green Girl. Thanks for watching.